honored to be standing up here after all of these amazing speakers. It's a hard act to follow. I'm not a doctor, not a researcher, not a survivor. I am a mom, I'm a wife, I'm a busy publishing professional in a job that I love. And one Friday in August of 2016, I was on my way home from that job on the hot New York City subway platform when I got a phone call. Jenny, I'm following up on your blood work. Do you have a moment? For years, my Aunt Laura had urged me to be tested for a very specific genetic mutation that runs in our family. It's called BRCA, or more commonly, BRCA, or more commonly yet, that thing that Angelina Jolie had. And thankfully, the test is covered by the Affordable Care Act. I believe that both my aunt and that act saved my life. Being a BRCA carrier means that you're at an increased risk for breast cancer and ovarian cancer, up to 80% and 30% respectively, and a handful of other cancers as well. About 1 in 800 women are diagnosed or test positive, mainly Ashkenazi Jewish, Latina, and African American women. The recommended course of action: removing your breasts, your fallopian tubes, and your ovaries before they can develop cancer. And now, 4 weeks after that blood test that I took, there's a genetic counselor on the phone asking me if I had a moment. Of course I had a moment. And almost 2 years later, I've had many more moments. Sitting in my gynecologist's office, this amazing woman who had been seeing me since I was 13 and delivered both of my sons, sitting there with my mom for an hour and a half in shock, listening to the swirl of potential next steps. And then my dad compiling a massive Excel file of potential surgeons organized by doctors, insurance affiliations, and which body part of mine they'd be removing. Sticker shock, especially with the doctors who didn't take insurance. Getting my first taste of what so many women struggle with every day, making health choices based on price. And also finding local online and support groups, being uplifted by the stories of survivors and previvors, and crushed at the many, many more stories of mothers, aunts, and sisters that were lost in their 30s, 40s, and sometimes even younger. In time, I made my own decisions about next steps, doctors, scheduling, further tests needed. I started developing the necessary coping mechanisms for me, which mainly was telling everyone I could about the specific next steps in my process. Knowing those next steps and that timeline was one of the few things that kept me grounded. I had my fallopian tubes removed last August. But this April, almost 2 years from that initial phone call, it was time for the big one, the prophylactic double mastectomy. It's an incredible feat of medicine, but to a regular person like me, an incredibly barbaric thing to choose to do, to carve up this body that I love in order to choose to live. I went in confidently though. I was young and healthy, so recovery should be relatively easy. The surgery went well. The doctors were happy. The pathology report was clear. I wept with relief coming out of the anesthesia that it was all behind me. I went in for the first follow-up appointment, ready to move forward with the next steps in my process towards breast reconstruction, until the plastic surgeon's team removed my bandages. And hearing the nurses concerned, "Oh," in response to the angry, darkening skin on my breasts. And then checked the same day with the breast surgeon, who confirmed that now I only had a 50% chance of keeping my nipples. And this may seem silly in the face of preventing cancer, but as someone going down the preventive route and having chosen this path, keeping my nipples and preserving that natural part of myself meant everything to me. And then panic, fueled by a crazy desire to take control and the crushing reality that it was really just time that would tell. I stocked up on everything that might help my skin heal, extra protein, supplements, and 2 hours a day in a hyperbaric oxygen chamber at a local wound center. I allowed myself one bad breakdown. And then I had to have a positive mindset because I knew that a negative one wouldn't help my healing. To top it off, my younger son, Theo, who has always been a mama's boy, starts to like my husband more than me because he can lift him up. So of course, I go into a panic that I won't get to enjoy the last precious drops of his 3-year-old babyhood, and that I made him somehow feel rejected in some way. And finally, the acceptance of all this. Understanding that despite everything lined up as perfectly as it could be, this isn't a process. It's health and my body and reality. It is a journey. And here I am, in the thick of it, but moving forward. I have weekly tissue expander fills as my pectoral muscles are painfully stretched to make room for implants that I'll never feel. My chest is numb. I'm in physical therapy and can finally lift my arms and my Theo again. Charlie's still a little bit too big, but we've come up with a great leaking system for our I love yous. And yet with all of this, you would say to me, but you're being proactive. You've lowered your risk from 80% to about 2%. And I would say, you're right. You're absolutely right. And I would make the same terrible choices again in a heartbeat because I will always choose to save my own life. That's why I urge you all to choose and demand preventive healthcare coverage, not only for yourselves, but for those who are even more challenged, who have less access to care. Choose to have screenings before you have symptoms. Choose what is and should always be a fundamental right. Choose to save your own life. Thank you.